Hello, welcome to this first sort of introduction to our webinar series for 2021. I've got Tim Sandle with me, who many of you out there will already know. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good, good. So we're going to be doing a webinar series this year based on Annex 1, which I think is at the top of everybody's mind. Would you agree?
Yes, yeah, I'm not surprised because we've got this new document coming out that's just much bigger, much more in depth, and it's kind of nudging the industry towards newer technologies, different ways of working, much more kind of risk centric. So it is the buzz subject at the moment in steriles.
So I presume there's a lot for people to be taking on board.
There is
The first instance, yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole range of different issues in there, but probably it's like the risk management piece is really big. Adopting new technologies in order to put barriers in place between people and products, and a lot more advice on how to classify a clean room, how to undertake cleaning and disinfection, how to process data, even little references about rapid methods. So there's just so much more in there, which is kind of giving a signal as to where the regulators are and where they expect the industry to be.
How does that compare with the previous document? Is it a lot more in depth?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think it's going from like 15 pages to 50 odd pages. The number of clauses, there's several hundred more. And even those that are roughly the same have been kind of rewritten. So if you look at the section just on cleaning and disinfection, for example, it's gone from sort of a couple of paragraphs to a couple of pages. So there's a lot more in there. It's introducing disinfection validation, concern about residues, for example. These are all new things that have kind of evolved over, what's kind of been a good 12 years since, Annex 1's had any kind of update.
Okay. So, I mean, are the key bottlenecks that people are going to sort of get into with this? Is there going to be critical pieces of data that they're going to have to supply to the regulators?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big challenge. So, and one of the kind of big debating points is how long is there going to be for an implementation? So you're going to get some regulators saying, well, everyone should be doing this already, to others who might be more in recognition that industry needs to adapt, and you might need anything from 6 months to 2 years to get ready. So, and it because of it applies to all pharma, and big players may have a lot of this in place. The smaller, medium to smaller sized pharmaceutical companies are going to need to have a careful think about things. And even then, there's still some areas that are a little bit open to interpretation as well. So one area is airflow visualization studies, which have always been for grade A and grade B areas, but the Annex kind of infers that there's a use for these in C and D, but that would be a big undertaking.
Right.
Another new area is the push towards sporicidal disinfection for setting up a filling machine. Now, for those using isolators or closed RABs, they're probably doing that, or it's quite easy to bolt on. But for anyone running an open RABs, that brings with it a myriad of health and safety concerns. So you're already into considering upgrading, and these aren't things that can be done overnight.
So I know it's been a long time in the discussion phases. Is there any idea of when this may be implemented?
My understanding is that it still looks likely it's going to be this year, but there's still a little bit of discussion with terminology, and I know that some industry groups are lobbying about having sufficient time so the annex gets published, but it doesn't necessarily become mandatory for a period of time. So we'll wait and see, but I think it's highly unlikely we'll get another draft, but
Right.
Who knows? It's as much political sometimes as it is procedural.
And is there a difference between the different regulatory bodies, or have they all come together to say this is going to be sort of harmonised across them?
Well, it's interesting. I think the other thing that's changed is obviously before Brexit, the UK was leading,
Yeah.
and now it's the French regulators who are leading. But a lot of the agenda and a lot of the key points, the MHRA were highly influential. Now, unfortunately, they're on the sidelines. So I think there's, these are some of the more complicated political aspects that need to be
Right.
unravelled. But at least for going forward, as far as UK is concerned, it will be accepting the revised Annex 1. Whether that carries on indefinitely, we don't know.
Okay. Well, what started the update? What was the thing that signalled it? Was it just because it hadn't been looked at for a long time, or?
I think so. I mean, I think everything needs to go through its review process, but I think also it had been left so long that it wasn't really in keeping with current ways of working, and new technologies and new things were coming in. So things like sterilisation's been enhanced. There's been changes to the European Pharmacopoeia about the generation of water for injection. So the European Pharmacopoeia had moved to saying you can do not just distillation, but distillation and reverse osmosis. Annex 1 only spoke about distillation, so that needed updating. There's also been a whole range of single-use, sterile, disposable technologies that have appeared on the market. And these can really enhance sterility assurance, but they weren't discussed. They weren't there at all. But equally, the risk is of people rushing in and putting those in place without considering the risks that those technologies themselves bring. So what happens when product contacts? Is there a risk of leachables and extractables, for example? So they're just some of the things that have been going on that the Annex needed to get ahead. Because if you look at the previous versions of the Annex, I think 1971 was the first kind of orange book that led that. It was always a little bit ahead, and it was always
Right.
leading the industry, and now it's needing to get itself back up
behind
to there and potentially in front again. So that's quite an interesting dynamic.
So with that in mind, obviously, with COVID and vaccines now being at everybody's forefront, is there an element of Annex 1 that's for those people, for the biopharma, for the vaccine people at all?
Yeah. I mean, Annex 1 would fully cover vaccine manufacture. Of course, that's done to a high standard, but there are elements of Annex 1 that would need to be incorporated into that process, particularly for making a vaccine that's safe and suitable for patients to use. And by the sounds of it, looks like we're going to need maybe an annual COVID vaccine, annual flu shot, the way things are looking. So it becomes important.
But do you think that will push the Annex 1 through faster in order to get these regulations in place? Or?
I don't know. I think it sounds like the Annex 1 is going at a fairly fast pace anyway. So I think kind of coincidentally they're kind of come together.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, as I said at the start, we've got our webinar series set up. So our first one is around Annex 1. You're going to give us a little bit more detail about it. That's on the 24th of March to 2 p.m. And you wrote a lovely white paper for us last year that also goes into more detail on Annex 1. So we look forward to speaking with you again and finding out a little bit more about these regulations and how we can sort of help people in these areas.
Yeah. And what I'm trying to do with the webinar is obviously highlight the key changes and just try and kind of signal to people that these kind of top 10 areas or whatever are the things you need to have a look at. They're the ones you need to begin to prepare for. Some are easy fixes, some are not, but at least you know what they are, and at least you've got an opportunity to begin to plan, develop your strategies, and you can, by watching the RSSL webinar series and reading some of the literature, you can be one step ahead of the game. So hopefully you'll find something of value.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks a lot, Tim, and I will speak again soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.